Penguin Random House Audio presents This is Your Brain on Birth Control, How the Pill Changes Everything, by Sarah E. Hill, Ph.D. Read for you by Nan Mcnamara. Note to listeners, this program includes a downloadable PDF that contains figures from the book. Introduction. Let me start this off by saying that I don't have an agenda. Well, maybe that's disingenuous. Nobody writes a book without an agenda. So I guess I probably have one, but it might not be the one you thought I had when you picked up a book about your brain and the birth control pill. This isn't the kind of book where I tell you a bunch of horrible, alarming facts about the pill and try to convince you that the pill has messed up your brain in at least 763 different ways, none of which are reversible. It's also not going to be the kind of book where I tell you that you shouldn't be on the pill, or strongly hint that if you stay on it, you'll pay for this ill-advised life choice by developing cancer, experiencing long-term memory loss, or growing a tail. This isn't going to be one of those books. I spent more than a decade of my life on the pill, and I'm pretty sure that I'm better off for having been on it. During that time, I was able to graduate summa cum laude from college, nerd, and go on to get a Ph.D. from one of the most competitive psychology programs in the country. Double nerd. Although not everyone would want to spend their late teens and early 20s subjecting themselves to this sort of educational masochism, I did. And the pill helped me do these things without having to worry about the possibility of getting benched because of a pregnancy I wasn't ready for. By freeing me from the reproductive consequences of sex, the pill played a huge role in helping me earn the highest degree in my field, build a productive research lab, and have my 2 children once I felt ready. I am hugely grateful for the opportunity to do all these things, and I'm pretty sure that I would have had a much harder time with all of them if it hadn't been for the pill. I'm not writing this book to try to talk you out of taking the same pill that granted me the opportunity to be in the position to write a book in the first place. This isn't that book. But this isn't going to be the other kind of book you might expect it to be either. I'm not going to recount for you a one-sided love story about women and the pill riding off into the sunset and living happily ever after, which is the other agenda you might expect from a book like this. Although the pill has done a number of amazing things for women, as you will soon see, these wonderful things come at a cost. Some of the costs are pretty significant, too. And the thing that's troubling about them is that most women have no idea that they're paying them. I know I sure didn't. You see, rather than being something that happens to you, your hormones are a key part of what makes you, you. You quite literally are your hormones. And when you change your hormones, which is what hormonal contraceptives do, you change the version of yourself that your brain creates. Because of this, the pill's reach goes far beyond the small number of targeted effects we take it for. It affects everything. And there's a growing body of research in psychology and neuroscience that shows this to be true. You just haven't been told about it until now. And once you learn everything I've learned, I think you'll agree that there's a good chance that we'll look back at our era 100 years from now and be shocked that we were so cavalier with women's hormones. Although the science, looking at how the pill changes women, is still in its infancy, we know enough to help you make informed decisions. First, you'll need to understand a few things about how your brain works and the role your hormones play in making you who you are. Then, you'll need to understand what the research says about how all this changes when you're on the pill. The former has been the focus of my research for more than 15 years as an evolutionary psychologist who studies women and health. The latter is something that I discovered only recently after a series of 3 unrelated events led me to begin my scientific journey into the world of women's brains on the birth control pill. In many ways, this journey has turned out to be the story of my young adult life. It may be your story, too. The 3 unrelated events. Like most good adventures, my journey into the world of the brain on birth control began in an unremarkable way, without realization that something important was about to happen. It all started when I went off the pill, a decision I made in a non-grand fashion. I knew that I was done having children, so my husband and I opted for a more permanent solution to pregnancy prevention. Since he was man enough to take the lead on that one, I was able to ditch the pill without thinking too much of it. Now, to give you a bit of background, at this point, I'd been on the pill pretty consistently for a little more than a decade. I'd gone off it here and there, but never for very long. I went off it to get pregnant, and I stayed off it for a year after each pregnancy to breastfeed. However, I can hardly count these experiences as being a representative sample of a normal psychological state for myself, since they were either very brief, pre-pregnancy, or clouded by a disorienting cocktail of sleep deprivation and post-pregnancy hormones, breastfeeding. Nonetheless, I wasn't expecting my world to change in any noticeable way based on my decision to go off the pill. I thought its consequences wouldn't extend beyond my ability to release an egg every month. This turned out to be a miscalculation. A couple of months after going off the pill, I realized that I felt different. I didn't notice it while it was happening, but one day I realized that my life had recently felt brighter and more interesting. Like I had walked out of a 2-dimensional black and white movie into a full-color, 3-dimensional, meaning-filled reality. I started exercising again and cooking, things that I used to take a lot of pleasure in but had kind of forgotten about. I had more energy. I noticed attractive men. I cared about how I looked in a way that I hadn't in a long time. I just felt alive. Like fully, vividly, awesomely, humanly alive. This didn't happen all at once. I didn't realize that any of these changes were happening until after they had happened. I just one day realized that I felt awake from an almost 10-year nap I hadn't known I was taking. As I reflected on all these changes in myself, I did the thing that women have learned to do in such situations. I wrote them off as being all in my head, which is a pretty stupid statement when you think about it. Your brain is in your head, and it is the command center for everything else in your body. So, of course, everything is in your head. I figured that going off the pill probably had something to do with it, but it seemed too sci-fi to think that my birth control pills would make me feel like I'd had a personality transplant. I figured that this was just another one of those weird things that happens to me but doesn't happen to anyone else. Or that maybe it was a byproduct of reaching my 30s, or the result of my getting more exercise. I filed my experiences away in the weird shit that happens to Sarah when she starts or stops a medication drawer in my brain and moved on with my life. This was event number 1. Now, the scientist in me feels obliged to tell you that I have no way of knowing for certain that these changes I experienced were caused by going off the pill. I didn't conduct an experiment on myself. But as you'll hear, there's every reason to believe that the pill may have had something to do with it. Flash forward a year or so, and you will find me standing in an elevator with a good friend of mine at a psychology conference. We were busy catching up and talking about research when she asked me whether I'd read a cool new paper that had come out about the pill and women's romantic and sexual relationships. I hadn't read it, so she proceeded to tell me that it showed some interesting differences in the relationship satisfaction and divorce rate between pill-taking and non-pill-taking women. We'll talk a lot more about this study in Chapter 5, but here's the punchline. Being on the pill seems to influence the types of men that women get involved with, their satisfaction with their partners, and even their likelihood of getting divorced. As we continued out of the elevator, we chatted about the results, speculated about whether these findings explained the relationship dynamics of different couples we knew.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?